over 1,000 black people escaped from slavery as a scout and a spy for the Union Army. So this whole narrative of black people waiting or needing whites to save them from slavery, we need to remove that. Whites assisted black people who were the leaders of the Underground Railroad. And that's how the story, that's the more accurate version of the story. So this would have, Finney's Barn would have been right there where the Detroit Savings Bank stands, which is going to be the new Roman Catholic Archdiocese. And there is a plaque on the wall. We can't see it because of all the construction going on. There's a plaque on the wall saying, here sits the site of Finney's Barn. So that is a historical spot. This whole Capitol Park area is a historic spot. Of course, it has now basically been, this whole area has been taken over by Dan Gilbert. That building there, the Albert, and here, it's called the red building in the corner was also subsidized housing that housed primarily artists. So you had visual artists, you know, people who paint and draw. You had sculptors. You had musicians. You had dancers. They built a indoor skate park inside of the building. And Dan Gilbert bought the building, and his company, they did a press conference saying that we have to welcome the artists. We can't marginalize the artists. We need artists to, if we want a vibrant city, we gotta support the artists. And then right after, you know, that press conference, about a month later, all the artists were kicked out of the building. They fought though. They sued and to stay in the building. And what ended up happening was a petition was made to the city of Detroit. City of Detroit sent inspectors in. The building was condemned as unlivable, unsafe, so they were forced to move out by the city. And then, of course, Dan Gilbert has been doing work to fix it up, and that's going to be his next. Well, they're already doing a lot of work over there now. You can see it looks like it's ready for something to happen there. So this whole area of Capitol Park is changing. What I hope doesn't happen is the removal of the history that's here. Finney Barn, the Capitol Union School where George Dolison worked, the plaque that was on the side of the Detroit Savings Bank. Hope they don't remove it once the Archdiocese takes over. So I want that, and I want, of course, this to remain a public space. A lot of times when you're rich and powerful and you own a lot of property in the area, you can decide what goes there and what doesn't. And so they do little movies here sometimes, and they have music and things like that. I don't want them to remove the history part while they're doing all of that. So this is Capitol Park. Okay, so earlier when we were in Campus Martials, I was telling you about William Faulkner, this black man who was accused in 1863 of molesting a white girl, a 9-year-old white girl, and it caused the first racial riot, the first true race riot in Detroit. That they were about to take William Faulkner out of the court that was inside of the city hall over there to a jail over here. Well, this was a jail. Not this particular building, but a building that sat on this site was the Wayne County Jail. Okay, so we're going to back up to 1831. In 1831, the Wayne County Jail sat here. There was no Detroit Police Department. There was a sheriff, Wayne County Sheriff, and a deputy. And if some big incident happened, they would raise up a militia to put down the uprising or whatever the problem, the melee was. And then after the melee was put down, they would send the militia back to whatever they were doing before. So there was no Detroit Police Department. You had a sheriff and a deputy. And this was where the building sat. In 1831, a love story helped to create the black community in Detroit. The love story doesn't start in Detroit, though. It starts in Kentucky. There's a 27-year-old beautiful woman. By all oral reports, she was strikingly beautiful. And her name was Rutha Blackburn. Well, her name was Rutha. She was enslaved on a plantation in Kentucky. And Thornton was a he was enslaved at his Thornton Blackburn. However, he was semi-free because he did errands for the person that was enslaving him. He went off on a wagon to town, to different cities in the Kentucky, in the Louisville, Kentucky area, where he would conduct business for the person that was enslaving. And so he knew his way around. He was 19 years old. And he was 19. This 19-year-old black man fell in love with this 27-year-old strikingly beautiful black woman. Now, in Kentucky, slavery was primarily on tobacco, cotton, and cotton plantations. And a 19-year-old black man or a young black man, of course, was worth a lot in that market. But a 27-year-old strikingly beautiful black woman was not worth as much. So the enslaver of Rutha Blackburn, or Rutha, she wasn't married to Thornton yet, the enslaver of Rutha decided to sail her down the river, down the Mississippi, into New Orleans as a fancy woman. Now that kind of tells you what she would be used for. She would be used, of course, for sexual slavery. And they were highly valuable. Beautiful black women were highly valuable in that market, in that slave market in New Orleans. So when Thornton found out what was about to happen, he basically planned an escape with Rutha. They escaped, they made it to Ohio, they got married on the way. So they became the Blackburns. They made it to Detroit. And when they got to Detroit, Canada was in the middle of a debate on ending slavery. And they were kind of in a state of flux of what happens when a person makes it to Windsor. Are they free? Or could they be sent back? Could they be enslaved? So the Blackburns didn't get mixed up in all of that. They stayed here in Detroit. Thornton became a stone mason. Rutha became a knitter. She knitted and made clothing and different items. And they became ensconced in what was the, budding black community here in Detroit. And one day in 1833, 2 years later, they had been living here for 2 years, Thornton was walking down the street and ran into the nephew of his enslaver's brother. When the nephew, I knew who he was, and went back to Kentucky, wrote an affidavit up. I saw Thornton, he's our property, and came back with another slave catcher to bring Thornton and Rutha back into Kentucky into slavery. They came to the Wayne County Sheriff, paid the sheriff and the deputy $50 apiece to assist them in capturing Thornton and Rutha, which the sheriff and his deputy did. They helped capture Thornton and Rutha. When they captured Thornton and Rutha, there was, of course, a court case. The slave catchers, of course, brought the affidavit to the judge to petition that they be sent back. The black people found out what was going on, and a number of them organized a plan. They first came to the court case hoping that the judge wouldn't send them back, but that didn't happen. So that night at Benjamin Willoughby, one of the black leaders of the abolitionist movement in Detroit, at his house, the plan was hatched of what to do. Now, Detroit had black people living here, but they weren't really functioning like a community. The abolitionists kind of worked together as a community, but that's about it. The rest of the black community really didn't function like a community yet. But this would change because of this event. So these black people, the leaders of this plan were Caroline French and her husband George, and Tabitha Lightfoot and her husband, I can't think of his name, Madison Lightfoot. So Tabitha and her husband Madison, and what's up?
Y'all doing documentary?
And George and his wife Caroline. So Caroline, the plan is to come and visit Rutha Blackburn in prison, which they did. The next day, Thornton and Rutha was supposed to be taken to a, 2 days later from the time they were captured, Thornton and Rutha was supposed to be taken to the river, placed on a steamer, taken down to Ohio, get off the steamer and get on a wagon and wagon on into Kentucky, back into slavery. However, the next day, the day before getting on that steamer, Caroline and Tabitha came to visit Rutha Blackburn in jail. They're allowed to visit her, so they visit her in jail. And while visiting her in her jail cell, Caroline French switches clothes with Rutha Blackburn. And Rutha Blackburn walks out with Tabitha Lightfoot, walks out of the jail, gets on a boat, not going down to Ohio and Kentucky, but over to Canada and to Windsor. It's 1833 now. Canada has formally ended slavery. So it's been 2 years since they came to Detroit. So she gets over to Windsor. Later on that night, Caroline French says, "I'm Caroline French, I'm free, you gotta let me go." The slave catchers say, "No, don't let her go. She has to take the place of Rutha Blackburn. We're gonna send her down to Kentucky." And when they come outside, there's about 1,000 black people out here with swords, sticks. Some have guns, knives, bricks, and they let Caroline French go. And she gets on a boat as well and goes to Canada just till all this blows over, just in case. But now they have a conundrum. They need to get Thornton to the steamer to take him back into slavery. And there's 1,000 black people out here. Some people have come from other places who are abolitionists. Even a few white abolitionists are there, but it's primarily a black event that was organized by those black people who met at Benjamin Willoughby's house 2 nights prior. So they attempt to transport Thornton to the river to get him on a boat to take him to Ohio. However, the crowd does not allow it. There's bricks being thrown, there's threats being given, shot rings out. The sheriff is either hit by a brick or grazed by a bullet and falls and busts his head on the ground. And after that, of course, he dies from those injuries. He doesn't die right then, but he dies later from those injuries. So the sheriff is basically killed because of this uprising. The deputy and the slave catchers, particularly the deputy, is in fear of his life. Thornton Blackburn tells the deputy and the slave catchers, "Let me talk to them because we're all going to get killed. They won't listen to you, but they'll listen to me." So Thornton is allowed to speak to them because the deputy is afraid for his life. And Thornton begins to speak to the crowd, and he talks very low. And the people can't hear him, so they get closer. And in getting closer, Madison Lightfoot hands him a pistol. Once Thornton Blackburn gets the pistol, he does what a brother would do. "Hey, y'all better get up off me before I kill all of y'all." So of course, the fight goes on. The slave catchers are still, even with this, they're still trying to get him back on that steamer to take back to Kentucky. But there's 1,000 black people who are going to prevent this from happening. So while that's going on, the